The lights inside the Galactic Council chamber were too bright for human eyes. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the back row, where they always placed Earth's representative. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from 847 different alien species. Some were tall, some were small, some breathed different air, but they all had one thing in common. They all looked down on humans. Sarah had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years now. 5 long years of sitting in the probationary section. That was what they called it. Probationary. Like humans were children who needed to prove themselves worthy of sitting with the adults. The meeting today was about trade routes. A Vexian diplomat was speaking, his voice translator making his words sound mechanical. He was talking about efficiency and profits. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes on her tablet. Earth had submitted a proposal 3 months ago about opening new trade routes through human space. The proposal would benefit everyone. It would cut travel time by 30% for ships going to the outer rim. But when the vote came, the proposal was rejected without discussion. Just like the last 10 proposals Earth had made. The chairman did not even read it out loud. He simply moved to the next item on the agenda. Sarah pressed the button to request speaking time. A small light appeared on her desk, read, "Denied." She was not surprised. Humans were rarely allowed to speak during council sessions. This had been happening for 30 years. 30 years since the Galactic Council had made first contact with Earth. They arrived in their massive ships, descending from the sky like gods. Humanity was amazed. They were not alone in the universe. They had neighbors among the stars, but the amazement did not last long. The Council looked at Earth and saw a primitive world. Yes, humans had computers and nuclear power. Yes, they had satellites and space stations. But compared to species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, humanity was nothing special. The Council gave Earth a gift. They gave them faster-than-light technology. Not the best technology, not even good technology. They gave humans the oldest, slowest FTL drives in the galaxy, drives that other species had stopped using centuries ago. But it was enough. Humans could now travel to other star systems. The Council called it charity. They said they were helping a young species take its first steps into the galaxy. But Sarah knew the truth. It was not charity. It was control. By giving humans outdated technology, the Council made sure that Earth would always be dependent on them, always be behind, always be weak, and the insults kept coming. Small ones at first. Human ships had to wait weeks for docking permission at Council stations. While other species docked immediately, human scientists were not invited to important research projects. Human merchants paid higher fees at Council ports. When humans complained, the Council gave excuses. They said it was about safety protocols, about bureaucracy, about making sure humans understood the rules. But everyone knew what it really meant. Humans were second-class citizens in the galaxy. Sarah filed protests every time. She wrote careful diplomatic letters. She followed every rule. She did everything right, and every single protest was ignored. They sat in some digital filing system somewhere, never read, never answered. Back on Earth, people were getting frustrated. The assembly met every week to debate what to do. Some politicians said Earth should withdraw from the Council completely. Why stay in a club that did not want you? Other politicians said to be patient. Earth was young. Give it time. Maybe in another 100 years the Council would take humans seriously. Sarah was on the side of patience. She believed in diplomacy. She believed that words could change minds. That respect could be earned through hard work and dedication, so she kept filing protests, kept attending meetings, kept trying. What she did not know was that others were not being patient. On the far side of Earth's moon, there was a military base. Luna Station. From the outside, it looked like a simple research facility, but inside its deep underground levels, something else was happening. Admiral James Okonkwo stood in the command center, watching dozens of screens. Each screen showed a different part of the galaxy. Council stations, trade routes, military installations. For 30 years, Admiral Okonkwo and his team had been watching, learning, planning. The Council thought humans were primitive. They thought human technology was simple and backwards, and that was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. While the Council was busy ignoring Earth, humans were busy preparing. Every human ship that visited a Council station was gathering information. Every human diplomat who attended a Council meeting was memorizing security procedures. Every human scientist who was rejected from research projects was studying the technology that rejected them. There was one person who noticed something strange. A young Vexian named Krell worked as a junior diplomatic attaché. His job was boring. He reviewed ship movements and filed reports that nobody read. But Krell was careful. He paid attention to details, and he noticed that human ships moved in patterns. They always requested permission to dock at the same stations. They always asked the same questions. They always took the same routes. It was too organized, too systematic, like they were mapping something. Krell wrote a report about it. He suggested that maybe humans were gathering intelligence. Maybe they were planning something. He sent the report to his supervisor. His supervisor laughed at him. Humans? Planning something? They could barely figure out basic FTL travel. They were harmless, irrelevant, nothing to worry about. The report was deleted and Krell was told to stop wasting time on conspiracy theories. But Krell was right. Humans were planning. They had been planning since the day the Council first insulted them. Since the day they realized that kindness and diplomacy would never earn them respect. The Council only understood one thing: power. So humanity prepared in secret. They built weapons the Council did not know about. They developed technology the Council thought was impossible. They trained soldiers for a war they hoped would never come. Admiral Okonkwo watched his screens and waited. He knew that one day the Council would cross a line. One day they would insult humanity one time too many. And when that day came, Earth would be ready. Sarah Chen did not know about any of this. She continued her diplomatic work, believing in patience and peaceful solutions. She went to her meetings. She filed her protests. She kept trying to make the Council see that humans deserved respect. The Council meeting ended. Sarah gathered her things and left the chamber. Another day of being ignored. Another day of sitting in the back row. Another day of watching other species make decisions about the galaxy, while humans sat silent. But silence was not weakness. Silence was strategy. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn the difference. The day everything changed started like any other council meeting. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the Great Chamber. They discussed mining rights in the Kepler sector. This was important to Earth because human explorers had discovered the sector first. They had mapped the planets. They had found the valuable minerals. By all rights, Earth should have gotten the mining contracts. Sarah sat in her usual seat in the back row. She had prepared her statement carefully. She had facts and figures showing why Earth deserved these mining rights. The Kepler sector could provide resources for 100 years. It could make Earth wealthy. It could help humans build better ships and technology. But before Sarah could even request speaking time, High Arbiter Zolmark stood up. He was from the Krithian Empire, one of the most powerful species in the Council. The Krithians were tall, with silver skin and 3 eyes. They had ruled parts of the galaxy for 5,000 years. They were not used to being told no. Zolmark smiled. It was not a friendly smile. He touched a control on his desk and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. On one side of the hologram were images of primitive humans from thousands of years ago. Humans in animal skins, humans with simple tools. On the other side were images of another alien species, a species that no longer existed as a free people, a species that the Krithians had enslaved. The chamber went quiet. Every representative could see what Zolmarks was suggesting. Zolmarks' voice echoed through the chamber. His words were translated into hundreds of languages, broadcast to every world in the Council. He said that perhaps humans did not understand their place in the galaxy. He said that perhaps Earth needed guidance from more advanced species. He said that humans would make adequate servants once they accepted their proper station in life. The chamber erupted, not in anger, in laughter. Representatives from dozens of species found this funny. The idea of proud humans being reduced to servants amused them. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke against it. None defended Earth. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of her desk. She felt anger like she had never felt before, but her face showed nothing. She had trained herself to hide her emotions. She stood slowly, gathering her things with careful, deliberate movements. The laughter died down as representatives noticed the human standing. Sarah looked directly at High Arbiter Zolmarks. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. She said only one sentence. The Terran Assembly will consider the Council's position. Then she walked out. She did not run. She did not slam doors. She simply left with dignity, and as she walked down the corridor, she sent a coded message to every human representative in council space. The message was simple: come home. Across the galaxy, human diplomats received the message. They stood up from their desks. They walked out of their offices. They boarded their ships and set course for Earth. Within hours, every human had left their posts in council space. The embassies were empty. The trade offices were closed. The research stations were abandoned. The council did not understand what this meant. They thought humans were having a tantrum, like children who did not get their way. High Arbiter Zolmarx laughed about it during dinner that evening. He told his colleagues that humans would come crawling back within a week, begging for forgiveness. Sarah's ship arrived at Luna Station 30 hours later. She was escorted immediately to a meeting room deep underground. The room was full of people she recognized: the president of the Terran Assembly, the Secretary of Defense, military commanders, intelligence chiefs, and Admiral Okonkwo. The admiral looked tired but determined. He had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. He pulled up a screen showing what looked like a star map. But it was not just stars. It was every council station, every military base, every trade route, everything humanity had been mapping for 3 decades. Sarah stared at the map in shock. She had no idea this existed. Admiral Okonkwo explained that from the very beginning, Earth had been preparing for this possibility. They had hoped it would never come. They had hoped diplomacy would work. But hope was not a strategy, he explained Project Damocles. For 30 years, every human who entered council space had 2 jobs: their official job and their real job. Diplomats gathered intelligence. Merchants planted surveillance devices. Scientists studied council technology. Slowly, carefully, humans built a complete picture of the Galactic Council's strengths and weaknesses. And they found weaknesses. Many weaknesses. The council was powerful but complacent. They had not fought a real war in centuries. Their security was designed to stop external threats, not internal ones. And they had let humans inside. The president spoke. Her voice was grave. She said that Earth could not let this insult stand. Not this time. This was not about pride. It was about survival. If the council thought humans were potential slaves, what would stop them from actually trying to enslave Earth? The room debated for hours. Some argued for caution. Some argued for immediate action. Finally, they reached a decision. Earth would give the council one chance, one opportunity to apologize and make things right. Sarah drafted the message herself. It was short and direct. Humanity demands a formal apology from High Arbiter Zolmarx and the Galactic Council within 72 hours. We also demand full membership rights with retroactive trade compensation. This is not a negotiation. This is notification. The message was sent through official council channels. It arrived at Zenith Prime during a regular session. The council secretary read it aloud, stumbling over the words. When she finished, there was silence. Then more laughter. High Arbiter Zolmarx stood and addressed the council. He said this was the most amusing thing he had heard in years. Humans giving the council an ultimatum. Humans making demands. What would they do if the council refused? Attack with their primitive weapons? Blockade council space with their slow ships? The council voted to ignore the message. They did not even send a reply. They simply moved on to the next item on their agenda. But one person was not laughing. Krell, the young Vexian attaché, pulled up his old reports. The reports about human ship movements. The reports that his supervisor had deleted. He started tracking human ships again, and what he saw made his blood run cold. All civilian human traffic had stopped. Completely. The merchants were gone. The tourists were gone. The research vessels were gone. In their place were ships that moved differently. Ships that used transponders Krell had never seen before. Ships that were heading to positions around council space. Krell tried to warn his supervisor again. He said something was very wrong. Humans were repositioning their forces, but his supervisor dismissed him once more. The supervisor said Krell was seeing patterns that did not exist. Humans did not have forces to reposition. They barely had a military. The clock was ticking. 72 hours. 3 days for the council to apologize. 3 days to avoid what was coming. On Luna Station, Admiral Okonkwo watched his screens. Human ships were moving into position across the galaxy. Weapon systems were coming online. Soldiers were boarding assault craft. Everything was ready. Sarah Chen sat in her quarters, unable to sleep. She thought about all the years she had spent trying to build bridges, trying to make peace. Had it all been for nothing? Admiral Okonkwo had told her that her work was not wasted. Diplomacy had bought time. Time for humanity to prepare. Time to get ready for this moment. But Sarah still hoped the Council would apologize. She hoped they would see reason. She hoped war could be avoided. Hour by hour, the deadline approached. 60 hours left. Then 48. Then 24. The Council continued their meetings as normal. They did not discuss the human ultimatum. They did not seem worried at all. With 2 hours remaining, High Arbiter Zolmarks gave a press conference. He was asked about the human demands. He laughed and called it the amusing defiance of children who did not understand the adults' game. He said humans would learn their place soon enough. That press conference was broadcast across the galaxy. Every human saw it. Every human heard Zolmarks' laughter. The 72 hours expired. No apology came. The line had been crossed, and humanity was done being silent. At exactly 72 hours and 2 minutes after the ultimatum was sent, something impossible happened. Every Council military installation in the galaxy lost its shields. Not just one or two, all of them. At the exact same moment, defense stations that protected entire planets went dark. Orbital platforms that guarded trade routes became vulnerable. Military bases that housed thousands of soldiers stood exposed. And nobody knew how it happened. There were no explosions, no weapon signatures, no ships detected anywhere near the installations. The shields simply stopped working. Engineers ran diagnostics and found nothing wrong with the equipment. The shields should work. The power was there. The systems were active, but the shields were gone. Panic spread through Council space. Military commanders demanded answers. Politicians accused each other of sabotage. Was this a terrorist attack? A technical malfunction? An act of war? Then a message arrived at every Council station, every government building, every military base. The message contained a single video feed. It showed Admiral James Okonkwo sitting calmly in a chair. Behind him was a wall of screens showing live feeds from inside Council facilities. Facilities that should have been secure. Facilities that nobody should be able to see inside. Admiral Okonkwo spoke in a calm, measured voice. He said that humanity had given the Council 72 hours to apologize. The Council had chosen not to. Therefore, humanity was now demonstrating what 3 decades of silence and patience had accomplished. He explained that the shield systems were not broken. They were controlled. Humanity had spent 30 years infiltrating every Council computer system, every network, every defense grid. Human agents had planted code so deep in Council systems that it could not be removed without rebuilding everything from scratch. The Council had always wondered why human technology seemed inconsistent, why humans excelled at some things but struggled with others. Now they knew. It was deliberate misdirection. Humanity had hidden its true capabilities behind a mask of incompetence. Admiral Okonkwo continued his explanation. He said that human artificial intelligence was centuries ahead of Council technology. The Council had laws limiting AI development because they feared it. Humans had no such fears. They had built AI systems so advanced that Council scientists could not even understand how they worked. These AI systems had spent 3 decades studying Council encryption, breaking it, rewriting it. Every message the Council thought was secure had been read by human intelligence. Every military plan had been analyzed. Every weakness had been found and catalogued. And quantum communication. The Council thought their encryption was unbreakable because it used quantum entanglement. But human physicists had solved problems the Council did not even know existed. Human quantum systems could intercept and decode messages instantly. Every secret the Council had was now in human databases. The Admiral showed footage of human ships. Not the slow, clumsy vessels that the Council was familiar with. These were different. Sleek warships that could move faster and hit harder than anything in Council space. Ships that had been hidden in deep space for years, waiting for this moment. He talked about nanomachines, microscopic robots smaller than a grain of sand. Every human who had visited a Council station had carried millions of these nanomachines. They spread through air systems. They attached to walls and floors. They were everywhere, and they were completely undetectable by Council sensors. These nanomachines had been dormant for years, sleeping, waiting. But now they were awake. They could disable systems. They could gather information. They could even release chemical compounds if necessary. Every council station was infested with them, and there was no way to get rid of them all. The Admiral's presentation showed weapons systems. The Council had always mocked human kinetic weapons. Bullets and missiles seemed primitive compared to energy weapons and plasma cannons. But humans had taken those primitive weapons and perfected them. Relativistic kill vehicles, missiles that accelerated to near light speed. At those velocities, even a small projectile carried the energy of a nuclear bomb, and they were almost impossible to stop. By the time sensors detected them, they had already hit their target. Admiral Okonkwo said that hundreds of these weapons were positioned throughout Council space. They had been launched decades ago, coasting silently through the void, waiting. Each one was programmed with specific targets. Each one could be activated with a single command. And then he mentioned something that made the Council's military experts freeze in terror. Human genetic diversity. The Council had developed biological weapons centuries ago. Viruses and bacteria designed to attack specific species. These weapons were so effective that they had been banned by treaty. But humans were different. Human genetic diversity was greater than any other species the Council had encountered. A weapon designed to target one human might not work on another. Creating a biological weapon that could affect all humans was nearly impossible. This made humanity naturally resistant to one of the Council's most feared weapon types. Admiral Okonkwo's message was clear. Humanity was not asking for respect. They were not begging for fair treatment. They were stating facts. The shields would be restored when 3 conditions were met. First, a formal apology from High Arbiter Zolmarks and the entire Council. Second, full Council membership rights with compensation for 30 years of unfair trade practices. Third, Zolmarks' immediate resignation from his position. The Admiral added one final point. Council worlds were not defenseless, but their defense now depended on human goodwill. Choose wisely, the message ended. The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for negotiations. A few quietly started packing their belongings, ready to flee if war broke out. Young Krell sat at his desk, feeling sick. His reports had been right. Humans had been planning this for decades, and everyone had ignored him. Now it might be too late. He pulled up his analysis programs and started tracking human ships again. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Human vessels were everywhere, in positions surrounding Council space, near every major trade route, within striking distance of every important world. It was a perfect blockade, a perfect trap. High Arbiter Zolmarks refused to accept reality. He stood before the Council and declared that this was an act of war. He said that humanity had shown its true nature. They were not a peaceful species. They were conquerors and liars. The Council should crush them immediately. Many Council members agreed with him. The Krithian Empire had the largest military force in the galaxy. They had 3,000 warships. 3,000 vessels armed with the most advanced weapons the Council possessed. Surely that would be enough to teach humanity a lesson. Zolmarks gave the order. The Krithian warfleet would travel to Sol system. They would surround Earth and force humanity to surrender. If humans refused, the fleet would destroy their orbital stations. They would blockade the planet until humans begged for mercy. The fleet assembled in Krithian space. 3,000 ships. Enough firepower to level a planet. Their commander was Admiral Thex, a veteran of dozens of campaigns. He had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start now. Admiral Thex addressed his fleet. He said that humans had pulled a clever trick with the shields, but tricks would not win a real fight. The Krithian fleet was the finest military force in the galaxy. They would show humanity what real power looked like. The fleet entered faster than light travel. The journey to Sol system would take 3 days. 3 days for Admiral Thex to plan his attack. 3 days for his crew to prepare. 3 days until the war began. On Luna Station, Admiral Okonkwo watched the Krithian fleet leave their home space. His expression was sad but not surprised. He had hoped the Council would choose peace. He had hoped they would see reason. But he had prepared for this outcome. He sent a message to the fleet commander defending Sol system. Captain Maria Kobayashi received the orders and felt her stomach tighten. She had trained for this moment. But training was different from reality. In 3 days, she would face the most powerful military fleet in the galaxy with a single destroyer. Her ship was called the Defiant. It was small compared to the massive Krithian battleships, but size was not everything. The Defiant carried weapons and technology the Krithians had never seen. Captain Kobayashi just hoped it would be enough. The galaxy held its breath. War was coming. A war between the ancient, powerful Galactic Council and the young, underestimated human race. A war that would change everything. 3 days passed. The Krithian fleet traveled through faster-than-light space toward Sol system. Admiral Thex spent those days reviewing tactics with his commanders. They studied old reports about human military capabilities. Those reports said humans had small ships with basic weapons, nothing that could threaten a Krithian battleship. The commanders discussed the shield incident. How had humans done that? Some thought it was a computer virus. Others believed humans had help from a council species. Nobody considered that humans might have actually developed superior technology on their own. Admiral Thex was confident. He had 3,000 ships. Even if humans had a trick or two left, numbers would win. 3,000 against how many? 100? 200? The Krithian fleet would overwhelm them through sheer force. On the 3rd day, the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system. Admiral Thex expected to see a massive defensive formation. Hundreds of human ships arranged in battle lines. Weapons platforms. Minefields. All the usual defenses a species would use to protect their homeworld. Instead, he saw one ship. A single human destroyer. It was small. Maybe 300 meters long. Tiny compared to the Krithian battleships that measured over 2 kilometers. The destroyer just sat there in space, engines idle, broadcasting a simple message on repeat. The message was a warning. It said that the Krithian fleet had 1 hour to turn around and leave. If they did not, there would be consequences. The message was signed by Captain Maria Kobayashi of the Earth Destroyer Defiant. Admiral Thex laughed when he heard the message. One ship, one tiny destroyer against his entire fleet, and they were giving him an ultimatum? The arrogance was almost impressive. He ordered his fleet to advance. They would ignore the human ship and proceed to Earth. Captain Kobayashi sat in her command chair watching the Krithian fleet move forward. She had hoped they would turn back. She really had. But she knew they would not. The Council had spent too many years believing they were superior. They could not imagine that humans might actually be a threat. She gave her crew their orders. They had practiced this 1,000 times in simulations. Now it was real. 1 hour passed. The Krithian fleet was halfway to Earth. Captain Kobayashi sent one final message. You were warned. Then she pressed a button. Nothing seemed to happen at first. The Krithian fleet continued forward. Then systematically ships began to go dark. Not all of them. Just every 10th ship. 300 vessels suddenly lost power. Their engines stopped. Their weapons went offline. Life support remained active, but everything else shut down. The ships became dead weight floating in space. The remaining ships stopped their advance. Admiral Thex demanded to know what was happening. His engineers had no answers. The systems showed no damage. No weapon hits. The ships just stopped working. Captain Kobayashi's voice came over every speaker in the Krithian fleet. She explained calmly, like a teacher instructing children. She said that humans had launched relativistic kill vehicles 30 years ago. They had been coasting through space ever since, positioned at every major entry point to human territory. These weapons could do 2 things. They could destroy a target completely with kinetic impact, or they could release an electromagnetic pulse that disabled electronics without harming the crew. Earth had chosen the second option. This was a warning. The Krithians were not in a battle. They were in a shooting gallery. Captain Kobayashi gave them a choice. Leave now, or the next pulse would target more ships. Admiral Thex was furious. He refused to retreat. He ordered his fleet to locate and destroy the human weapons. His ships scattered, searching space with every sensor they had. They found nothing. The relativistic weapons were too small and too fast. By the time sensors detected them, they had already passed by. The Krithians fired at empty space, wasting ammunition on targets that were no longer there. Admiral Thex made a decision. If they could not find the human weapons, they would go after the human ship. He ordered his fastest cruisers to attack the Defiant. 20 ships broke formation and accelerated toward the lone destroyer. Captain Kobayashi did not try to run. She did not fire weapons. She simply waited. When the Crythian ships were within weapons range, another 300 vessels went dark, including every ship that had been attacking the Defiant. The pattern was now clear. Humans were not just disabling random ships. They were disabling specific ones. Any ship that showed aggression, any ship that tried to advance. The message was obvious. We can shut down any ship we want whenever we want. Admiral Thex felt fear for the first time in his career. 600 of his ships were disabled. Half his fleet was still functional, but for how long? If humans could keep doing this, the entire fleet would be helpless within an hour. Then something worse happened. Human ships appeared. Not just one or two, dozens of them. They materialized out of nowhere, dropping out of some kind of stealth mode. They surrounded the Crythian fleet. Each human ship was small, but there were so many of them. But the humans did not attack. They just waited, watching. Admiral Thex realized what was happening. This entire engagement had been a demonstration. Humans were showing the Crythians that they could destroy the fleet if they wanted to, but they were choosing not to. They were showing mercy. That was somehow worse than being destroyed. It meant humans did not see the Crythian fleet as a threat. They saw it as an inconvenience, like adults watching children play with toy weapons. A transport ship approached the Crythian flagship. It docked and human marines boarded. They walked through the ship like they owned it. Nobody tried to stop them. What was the point? The marines reached the bridge and handed Admiral Thex a data pad. It contained terms of surrender. The terms were simple. The Crythian fleet would return home. They would deliver a message to the Council. Earth had shown restraint today. Next time they might not. The choice was the Council's. Peace or destruction. The Marines left as quickly as they had arrived. Power returned to the disabled ships. Their systems came back online as if nothing had happened. The human ships disappeared, returning to stealth mode or jumping away. Within minutes, the Crythian fleet was alone again. Admiral Thex gave the order to withdraw. His fleet limped back to Crythian space. They had not fired a single successful shot. They had not damaged a single human ship. They had been utterly defeated without a real battle ever taking place. The journey home was silent. Nobody spoke about what had happened. The entire fleet was in shock. They had thought they were the strongest military force in the galaxy. Now they knew the truth. They were not even close. When the fleet reached Crythian space, they transmitted everything to the Council. Video footage, sensor readings, combat logs. The Council saw it all. They watched 3,000 ships become helpless. They watched humans demonstrate complete superiority without killing anyone. Young Krell analyzed the data carefully. He prepared a report for the Council. His conclusion was simple and terrifying. Based on what humans had shown, this was just a fraction of their capabilities. They had revealed enough to win, but not enough to show everything they could do. If the Council went to total war with humanity, they would lose. Not might lose, would lose. The mathematics were clear. Human technology was not just better. It was generations ahead, and they had been hiding this advantage for 30 years. The Council held an emergency session. Every representative attended. They had a decision to make. They could accept humanity's terms and apologize, or they could escalate the war and face the consequences. Some species wanted to fight. Pride demanded it. How could they surrender to humans? But other species looked at the data and saw reality. This was not about pride. This was about survival. High Arbiter Zolmark stood alone. His insult had started this crisis. His arrogance had led to this disaster. Now he faced a chamber full of angry representatives who blamed him for bringing the galaxy to the edge of war. The Crythian Empire itself turned against him. His own people demanded his resignation. The Emperor personally called for him to step down. Zolmarks had led their fleet to humiliation. He had endangered their entire civilization. Zolmarks realized he had no choice. He could resign or the Council would remove him by force. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. All because he had underestimated humanity. The Council sent a message to Earth. They requested formal negotiations. They were ready to discuss terms. Humanity had won, not through violence, not through destruction. They had won by being patient, by being prepared, by being smarter than everyone expected, and now the real work would begin. The work of building a new relationship between Earth and the galaxy, a relationship based on respect, not charity, on equality, not submission. The galaxy was about to change forever. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the main entrance of Zenith Prime Station. Not the side entrance where humans had always entered before. The main entrance, the one reserved for full council members. Guards stood at attention as she passed. They did not stop her. They did not question her credentials. They showed respect. The council chamber had been rearranged. Earth's seat was no longer in the back row with the probationary members. It was in the primary tier, among the founding species. Sarah sat down and looked around. Representatives from other species watched her carefully. Some with respect, some with fear, some with barely hidden anger. The chamber was full. Every species had sent their representatives. They knew this was an important moment. The day the galaxy changed, High Arbiter Zolmark stood at the center of the chamber. He looked smaller somehow. His pride was gone. His arrogance had been replaced by shame. He had been stripped of his title. He was no longer High Arbiter. He was just Zolmarks, a disgraced diplomat who had nearly started a war. The acting chairman called for silence. Zolmarks began to speak. His voice was quiet but clear. He apologized to humanity. He apologized for his insult. He apologized for treating humans as inferior. He said his words had been cruel and wrong. He took full responsibility for the crisis. Then he apologized on behalf of the entire council. He said the council had failed humanity for 30 years. They had been unfair. They had been disrespectful. They had judged humans without truly understanding them. This had been a mistake, a terrible mistake. The apology was broadcast across every world in council space. Billions of beings watched a proud Crithian admit that humanity deserved better treatment. It was humiliating for him, but it was necessary. When he finished, Zolmarks announced his resignation. He would leave political life completely. His career was over. He walked out of the chamber with his head down. Sarah watched him go and felt no satisfaction. This was not about revenge. It was about justice. The acting chairman called for a vote. The motion was simple. Grant Earth full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. The vote was unanimous. Every species voted yes, some because they believed it was right, some because they were afraid of what would happen if they voted no. But Sarah was not finished. She stood and requested permission to speak. The chairman granted it immediately. Sarah addressed the council in a calm, measured voice. She said the apology was accepted. Earth's full membership was appreciated, but there was more work to do. She presented Earth's additional requirements. First, retroactive compensation for 30 years of unfair trade practices. Earth had been charged higher fees, denied access to markets, and blocked from profitable contracts. This had cost humanity trillions of credits. The Council would pay it back. Second, Earth demanded access to all Council historical databases. For 30 years, humans had been denied this knowledge. They were told it was restricted to full members only. Now humans were full members. They wanted complete access. Third, Earth wanted a seat on the Security Directorate. This was the small group of species that made decisions about military matters and galactic security. It was the real power center of the Council. Only 5 species had ever held seats. Now there would be 6. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. These demands went beyond a simple apology. This was restructuring the entire power balance of the Council. But Sarah was not done yet. She said that Earth had watched the Council for 30 years. Humans had seen not just how they were treated, but how others were treated. The Council claimed to be a democratic organization, but it was really an oligarchy. The strong species made all the decisions. The weak species had no voice. This had to change. Sarah presented a proposal for Council reform. Every species would have equal voting rights regardless of military power or economic strength. There would be constitutional protections for developing species, laws against discrimination and exploitation, fair trade regulations that applied equally to everyone. The chamber erupted. Some species supported the reforms. They had been waiting for someone to challenge the old system. But others were furious. These reforms would limit their power. They would lose their advantages. The debate went on for hours. Arguments, counter-arguments. Some species threatened to leave the Council entirely if reforms passed. Sarah listened to it all calmly. Then she said something that silenced everyone. She reminded them that Earth's protection protocols were still active. Human nanomachines were still in every Council station. Human systems still controlled Council defense grids. Human weapons were still positioned throughout the galaxy. This could all be removed. But only after reforms passed. It was not quite a threat. But it was not quite a promise either. It was simply a fact. The Council existed at humanity's mercy right now. They could accept reform and move forward in partnership, or they could refuse and see what happened. The vote was called. The reforms passed, not unanimously this time. Some species voted against it, but enough voted yes. The Galactic Council would become the Galactic Union, a true democracy with constitutional rights for all members. Sarah sat down, feeling exhausted but satisfied. Earth had not just won a seat at the table, they had rebuilt the table itself. That evening, Sarah met privately with Admiral Okonkwo. He had come to Zenith Prime for the signing ceremony. They sat together in a quiet observation room, watching Earth rise above the station's horizon. Sarah asked him a question that had been bothering her. She asked if humanity would have actually used the relativistic weapons to destroy Council worlds. If the war had escalated, would Earth have committed genocide? Admiral Okonkwo was quiet for a long time. Then he said he did not know. The weapons existed. The plans existed. But whether humanity would have actually pushed that button, he hoped they would never have to find out. The uncertainty was the true deterrent. As long as the Council believed humans might do it, they would never test the threat. Sarah felt uneasy about that answer. But she understood it. Power without the will to use it was meaningless, but too much willingness to use power was dangerous. Humanity had to walk a careful line. 6 months passed. The Galactic Union held its first meeting under the new constitution. The changes were dramatic. Species that had never spoken before now had voices. Trade agreements were rewritten to be fair. Military actions required approval from a diverse security council, not just the powerful few. Not everyone was happy. Some species grumbled about lost privileges. Some accused humans of being hypocrites. They said Earth had used force to impose democracy, which was a contradiction. Maybe they were right. But the alternative had been to let injustice continue. Human scientists finally got access to the historical databases. What they found amazed them. Ancient civilizations, lost technologies. The history of the galaxy stretched back millions of years. There was so much to learn, but there was also wariness. Other species watched humans carefully. They had learned that humanity was not weak, not primitive, not ignorant. Humans were dangerous. They could smile and negotiate while hiding weapons that could crack planets. This made them unpredictable, frightening. Young Krell had been promoted again. He was now Earth's official liaison to the Vexian government. He worked with human diplomats regularly. He found them fascinating. They were polite and friendly, but he never forgot what they were capable of. He had seen the data. He knew what human weapons could do. One day, Krell asked a human diplomat about it. He asked if humans had always been planning for war. The diplomat smiled and said no. Humans had hoped for peace, but they had prepared for war. Hope was not a strategy. Preparation was. Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Union Assembly on the anniversary of the reforms. She had been asked to give a speech about the past year. She talked about progress, about cooperation, about the new partnerships forming between species. But then she talked about responsibility. She said that humanity had gained power through patience and preparation. They had proven they could fight. Now they needed to prove they could lead wisely. Power without wisdom was tyranny. Humanity had to be better than the system they replaced. She asked a question that echoed through the chamber. What kind of power would humanity become? Would they repeat the mistakes of those who came before? Would they use their strength to dominate others? Or would they prove that their greatest strength was not their weapons but their wisdom? The answer to that question would be written over the coming years and decades. But for now, the galaxy had changed. A small blue world had remained silent for 30 years. Watching, learning, preparing. And when they finally spoke, their words reshaped the entire galaxy. The chamber emptied slowly after Sarah's speech. Representatives returned to their worlds with much to think about. The age of the old council was over. The age of the Galactic Union had begun, and at the center of it all was humanity, no longer dismissed, no longer ignored, no longer silent. Earth rose above Zenith Prime Station, a small planet that had taught the galaxy a lesson. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume silence means weakness. And never ever insult those who have the patience to wait and the strength to act when the time comes, the galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was a good thing.